"Daddy, please don't leave me." Those were the first words I heard that night, and they were the reason I stopped being the man everyone in New York feared. Rain hammered the windshield of my black SUV as I drove through Manhattan, turning the streetlights into long golden streaks across the glass. I had spent the evening in a world of expensive suits, quiet rooms, and people who never said what they really meant. I was Ethan Callahan, 38 years old, a man who had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than shouting. Then I heard the sound. Tires. A sharp screech. A sudden crash somewhere ahead. My driver slowed, but I was already opening the door. "Pull over." I stepped into the rain. Across the intersection, a small sedan sat at an angle near the curb, its headlights still glowing through the storm. I heard someone calling for help. A little girl. I ran toward her. She was sitting beside the car, shaken and crying, with a stranger holding an umbrella over her. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her brown hair was soaked against her cheeks. Her small hands trembled as she looked around for someone she knew. "Where's your mom?" I asked gently. She stared at me. No answer. "Your dad." Her eyes filled with tears. Then she reached for my hand. I crouched beside her. "Hey, you're safe now." I don't know why those words came so easily. I had never been good with children. I had barely allowed myself to remember the last child I had held. 7 years earlier, my daughter had disappeared from my life. Everyone told me she was gone. I had spent years carrying that loss like a locked room inside my chest. I stopped talking about her, stopped saying her name, stopped allowing myself to hope, until that little girl looked into my eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. I froze. "What did you call me?" She blinked, confused, as if she didn't understand why the question mattered. Then she looked down at my hand. Her fingers tightened around mine. "You look like him." My heart gave one hard beat. "Like who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached beneath the collar of her yellow raincoat and pulled out a tiny silver bracelet. A crescent moon hung from it. I knew that moon. I had chosen it myself. 7 years ago, before everything I loved disappeared, I had bought an identical bracelet for my daughter. I stared at the little piece of silver in the rain. My first instinct was denial. Coincidence. Nothing more. It had to be. But then the girl looked up at me again, and something about her eyes felt painfully familiar. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated. "Lily." Lily. The name meant nothing to me. And yet, as I stood there beneath the cold Manhattan rain, holding the hand of a child I had never met, a thought entered my mind that I was terrified to believe. What if the daughter I had spent 7 years mourning had never been gone at all? The little girl was still holding my hand when I realized I had forgotten how to breathe. Rainwater ran from the edge of her yellow coat, dripping onto the pavement between us. I looked at the silver crescent bracelet again. I had seen that shape before. Not recently. Not somewhere in the city. 7 years ago, I had held a tiny box in my hands and imagined placing that same moon around my daughter's wrist. I had never gotten the chance. "Lily," I said softly, "where did you get this bracelet?" She looked down at it as if she had been asked about something ordinary. "It was mine when I was little." My chest tightened. "Who gave it to you?" She shrugged. "I do not remember." A paramedic approached and checked her carefully before telling me she needed to be taken to the hospital for observation. Lily looked at me immediately. "Are you coming?" I should have said no. I had people waiting for me, calls I needed to make, a life that never stopped demanding my attention. But the way she asked made the answer impossible. "Yes," I said. "I am coming." At the hospital, the rain followed us in the form of wet footprints across the polished floor. Bright lights replaced the darkness outside. Nurses moved quietly around us. Lily sat on the examination bed while a doctor checked her over. I stood near the door, watching her. She seemed calm now, but every few seconds her fingers touched the silver moon at her wrist. I could not stop looking at it. Finally, a nurse noticed. "It is pretty, is it not?" she said. Lily smiled faintly. "My mother said it was special." I looked up. "Your mother?" Lily nodded. "Do you remember her name?" Her smile disappeared. She stared at the blanket. "She told me not to forget her." I felt something shift inside me. "Where is she now?" Lily was quiet for several seconds. "I do not know." The nurse looked at me, then back at Lily. I said nothing. I did not want to frighten her. But inside, questions were already racing through my mind. A 7-year-old girl. No parent beside her. A silver moon bracelet identical to the one I had chosen for my daughter. A missing mother. And now a sentence that would not leave me alone. She had said her mother told her not to forget her. I stepped into the hallway and called my most trusted investigator. I need everything you can find on a girl named Lily Carter, I said. 7 years old. Find her guardians, medical records, school records, everything. There was a pause. How urgent is this? I looked through the glass at Lily. She was drawing something on a piece of paper. A small house. A tree. 3 people standing together. Then she added a 4th figure. A man wearing a dark suit. I stared at the drawing. Very urgent, I said. A few minutes later, Lily looked toward the hallway and caught my eye. She smiled. It was a small, innocent smile. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. Hope. And that frightened me more than anything. The next morning, I was still sitting outside Lily's hospital room when my investigator called. I had not slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the silver crescent on her wrist. I found her records, he said. Her full name is Lily Carter. 7 years old. She has been living under the care of a woman named Margaret Carter. I looked through the glass. Lily was awake, quietly coloring at the small table beside her bed. And her parents? I asked. There was a pause. Too long. Her records list no biological father. Her mother is listed as deceased. My hand tightened around the phone. What is the mother's name? Emily Carter. The name meant nothing at first. Then something inside me shifted. Emily. 7 years ago, the woman who had been with me when my daughter disappeared had been named Emily. Emily Callahan. My former wife. I had spent years believing she was gone too. But this record said Emily Carter. Different last name. Same first name. Same year. Same child. I looked at Lily again. Send me everything, I said. Immediately, I ended the call and walked into her room. Lily looked up. Are you leaving? No. I pulled a chair beside her bed. I just needed to make a phone call. She nodded and returned to her drawing. I watched her color the little house from the night before. This time, she had drawn only 3 people. Herself, a woman, and a man. Who is he? I asked. Lily looked at the picture. My daddy. My heart stopped for a second. Do you remember him? She shook her head. Not really. Mommy used to talk about him. What did she say? Lily thought carefully. She said he was not a bad man. I looked away. My throat felt tight. 7 years of silence. 7 years of believing my daughter was gone. And now a little girl was telling me that her mother had spoken about a father she barely remembered. Did she ever tell you his name? I asked. Lily shook her head. She said I would know him when I saw him. I stared at her. And have you seen him? She looked directly at me. Maybe. I could not answer. Just then, my investigator sent the records to my phone. I opened the first document. Birth date. 7 years ago. The same month. The same day. My eyes moved to the next line. Mother, Emily Carter. Father, unknown. I read it again. Then again. Something was wrong. My daughter's original birth certificate had listed both parents. I knew because I had held it in my hands. Someone had changed this record. I looked at Lily's silver bracelet. The little crescent moon caught the morning light. Then I noticed something I had missed the night before. On the inside of the bracelet was a tiny engraving. 3 letters. ECC. My initials. Ethan Callahan. I stood up slowly. The room seemed suddenly too quiet. Lily looked at me with those familiar eyes. Mr. Callahan? She asked. Why are you looking at me like that? I swallowed hard. Because I was beginning to understand something I had spent 7 years trying not to imagine. Someone had not simply taken my daughter away. Someone had erased her. And if Lily really was the child I had lost, then somewhere in this city was a person who had spent 7 years making sure I never found her. The room felt smaller after I saw those 3 letters. ECC. My initials. I stared at the bracelet, trying to convince myself there was another explanation. There had to be. But every explanation I imagined collapsed under the weight of what I already knew. I called my investigator again. Find Margaret Carter, I said. I want to know where she lives, where she worked, and how she became Lily's guardian. But do not approach her yet. Understood. I ended the call and looked back at Lily. She was watching me carefully now. Are you angry? She asked. No, I sat beside her. Why would you think that? She lowered her eyes. People get angry when they find out about me. That sentence stayed with me. Who gets angry? I asked. Lily hesitated. Margaret. I felt a cold silence settle inside me. What does Margaret say about your mother? Lily looked toward the window. She says Mommy made a mistake. What kind of mistake? She left. Lily said it quietly. She said Mommy could not stay with me. I did not know what to say. 7 years ago, Emily had disappeared from my life without an explanation. I had searched for answers until there were none left to find. I had been told my daughter was gone. I had accepted the worst because I had no other choice. But now a child was sitting in front of me, carrying a bracelet I had chosen, repeating memories connected to a woman I thought I had lost. My investigator called again. I found Margaret's address. He gave me a location in Queens. There is something else. What? She has been receiving monthly payments from an account opened 7 years ago. I stood up. Whose account? I am still tracing it. I looked at Lily. Keep going. There is one more thing. The account was created under a name that was later changed. Which name? He paused. Emily Callahan. I closed my eyes. For 7 years, I had believed Emily had abandoned us. Now I was learning someone had been moving money under her name while raising my daughter under another identity. I wanted answers immediately. But when I looked at Lily, I knew I could not turn this into another frightening memory for her. So I stayed. I sat beside her until the afternoon light softened across the hospital room. We talked about simple things. Her favorite color. Her favorite book. The fact that she hated broccoli but loved pancakes. Normal things. Small things. Things I had missed. Then Lily reached for my hand. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why do you look sad when you look at me? I swallowed. Because you remind me of someone. Who? I looked into her eyes. Someone I have been missing for a very long time. Lily was quiet. Then she placed her small hand over mine. Maybe you found her. I could not speak. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. A message from my investigator appeared on the screen. He had traced the account. The money was still being transferred, and the latest payment had been made that very morning. I stared at the message. Someone connected to Lily was still active. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who had been watching from the shadows. I looked toward the hospital window. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. But somewhere across the city, the past had just opened a door. And this time, I was ready to walk through it. By the time the sun began to set, I had already made a decision. I was going to find Margaret Carter. Not because I wanted to frighten her. Not because I wanted to force answers out of her. I needed the truth, and I needed it before another piece of Lily's past disappeared. My investigator found her address in Queens. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and children rode bicycles on the sidewalk. Nothing about it looked connected to my world. I left the hospital just before 6 in the evening, but before I stepped into the elevator, Lily called my name. Are you coming back? I turned around. She was sitting against her pillows, holding the little silver moon. Yes, I told her. I promise. She smiled. Okay. That one word followed me all the way to Queens. When I arrived at Margaret's house, the porch light was already on. I stood across the street for a moment, watching the windows. I expected to see someone moving inside. Instead, I saw a photograph taped to the living room wall. Even from the sidewalk, I could make out a little girl standing beside a woman. Lily. I crossed the street and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. My investigator called. She left 20 minutes ago. Where did she go? I am tracking her now. I looked through the glass beside the door. There were family photographs everywhere. Lily at 3. Lily at 4. Lily at 5. Lily at 6. Years of memories arranged across a wall. But there was something strange. Every photograph had one thing missing. Lily was never standing beside her mother. Someone had carefully cropped the pictures. I stepped back. Send me copies of everything. My phone buzzed almost immediately. One photograph appeared on the screen. It was older than the others. Lily was a baby, wrapped in a pale pink blanket. Beside her stood Emily, my former wife. I knew her face instantly, but the woman holding the baby was not Margaret. It was Emily, and around the baby's wrist was the same silver crescent. I felt my eyes burn. For 7 years, I had believed I would never see that face again. Now I was staring at it on a screen in the middle of Queens. Then another message arrived. My investigator had found the original payment records. The account had been created under Emily's name shortly after Lily disappeared. But the payments were not going to Margaret. They were going somewhere else. Where? I asked. He sent me an address. My stomach tightened. It was a private storage facility in Brooklyn. I drove there immediately. Inside the small office, the manager searched his records and found a storage unit rented 7 years earlier. The name on the contract was Emily Callahan. My hands went still. The manager gave me the key. I stood outside the unit for several seconds before turning the lock. The door opened with a quiet metallic sound. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, baby clothes, photographs, hospital, records, birthday cards. And on top of one small wooden box was a note written in handwriting I knew better than my own. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. There were only 6 words. Ethan, I never meant to leave. I read them again. Then I saw the date on the note. It had been written 7 years ago, the same day my daughter disappeared. And suddenly, the mystery was no longer about where Lily had been. It was about why Emily had been forced to disappear with her. The note stayed in my hand long after I had read it. Ethan, I never meant to leave. 6 words. 6 words that changed everything I thought I knew about the worst night of my life. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit and looked at the boxes around me. There were years of memories inside them. Lily's first birthday card, a tiny pair of white shoes, a photograph of Emily holding our baby, and beneath the photograph was a hospital bracelet with Lily's birth date. I picked it up carefully. The date matched. The name did not. Someone had written Lily Carter instead of Lily Callahan. My phone rang. It was my investigator. Ethan, you need to hear this. Go ahead. I traced the storage payments. They were made by Emily for the first 3 months. After that, someone else took over. Who? He paused. A woman named Margaret Carter. I looked at the boxes again. Why would Margaret pay for Emily's storage unit? That is what I am trying to understand. I found another envelope beneath the baby clothes. My name was written across the front. Ethan. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of Lily as a baby, asleep in Emily's arms. On the back, Emily had written one sentence. If you are seeing this, then I failed to protect her. My chest tightened. I read it again. Then my investigator spoke through the phone. There is more. I found an old medical record connected to Lily. What kind of record? A pediatric record from 7 years ago. The doctor listed Emily as the mother. But the emergency contact was not you. Who was it? Margaret Carter. I stood slowly. The pieces were moving, but they still did not fit. Why would Emily leave Lily with Margaret? Why would she change her daughter's name? And why had she continued paying for the storage unit? I searched another box and found a small recording device. It was old, but the battery still worked. I pressed the button. Emily's voice filled the quiet room. Ethan, if you ever hear this, I need you to know something. I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I believed Lily would be safer if you did not know where she was. I closed my eyes. I was told that if you found her, she would never be safe again. I was given one choice. Disappear with her, or lose her completely. Her voice trembled. Then she said something that made my entire world stop. There is someone you trusted who knows exactly what happened. The recording ended. I played it again. And again. Someone I trusted. Someone close enough to know about Lily. Someone who had known where Emily was going. My mind went through every person who had been around us 7 years ago. Family, friends, employees, people I had trusted without question. Then one name came to me. Thomas Reed, my former business partner. He had been the last person to speak with Emily before she disappeared. I had never suspected him because he had stayed beside me through the entire search. He had told me to accept that Lily was gone. He had been the one who convinced me to stop looking. I stared at the recording device in my hand. For 7 years, I had believed Thomas was helping me survive the loss. What if he had been helping me live with a lie? My phone vibrated again. A message from the hospital. Lily had woken up. She was asking for me. I looked at the boxes one last time. Then I took the photograph of Emily and Lily and placed it carefully inside my coat. I had spent 7 years searching for a daughter I believed was gone. Now I knew she was alive. But before I could bring her home, I had to uncover the truth about why she had been taken from me. And for the first time, I knew exactly where to start. By the time I reached the hospital, the city lights had begun to blur beneath the windshield. I kept thinking about Thomas Reed. 7 years ago, he had stood beside me when everything fell apart. He had told me that searching would only reopen the wound. He had told me Lily was gone. I had believed him because I needed someone to believe. Now every memory of those days felt different. I walked into Lily's room and found her sitting up, holding the silver moon bracelet in both hands. When she saw me, her face softened. You came back. I promised. I pulled a chair beside her bed. She looked at the photograph in my hand. Who was that? My eyes moved to the picture of Emily holding her as a baby. Someone from my past. Lily studied the photograph for a moment. She looks like my mommy. My heart stopped. What did you say? My mommy looked like her. I sat very still. Lily, do you remember your mother's name? She nodded slowly. Emily. I did not tell her that Emily was my former wife. I did not tell her that the woman in the photograph was the same woman she remembered. She was only 7. She deserved the truth, but she deserved it gently. Do you remember anything else? I asked. Lily looked toward the window. She used to sing to me. What song? She hummed a few notes. The same melody from the night before. The melody I had sung to my daughter when she was a baby. I felt tears rise before I could stop them. Lily noticed. Why are you crying? Because I know that song. She smiled. Mommy said my daddy used to sing it too. I could not speak. My investigator entered the room a few minutes later and quietly handed me an envelope. The records from the old hospital, he said. I found something. Inside was a copy of Lily's original birth record. This time, the father's name had not been removed. Ethan Callahan. My name. I stared at the page. 7 years. One name. One child. One truth that had been buried beneath paperwork and silence. But I still needed certainty. I asked for a private DNA test. Not because I doubted what I was seeing. I needed proof that no one could erase again. The sample was collected that evening. Then came the hardest part. Waiting. I sat alone in the hospital corridor while Lily slept. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future I had stopped. Believing was possible. A little girl running through my house. Her drawings on the refrigerator. Her voice calling my name. The simple things I had missed without even knowing how much they mattered. My phone finally rang. Ethan, my investigator said, the results are ready. I stood. Tell me. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, the probability of biological parentage is greater than 99.9%. I closed my eyes. I could not move. I could not speak. 7 years of grief came rushing back all at once, followed by something I had been too afraid to name. Relief. Lily was not a memory. She was not a photograph. She was not a story from a life that had ended. She was alive. My daughter was alive. I walked back into her room and stood beside her bed. She opened her eyes. Are you okay? She whispered. I sat beside her and took her small hand. Yes, I said, even though tears were running down my face. I think I just found something I have been looking for my whole life. She squeezed my fingers. What? I looked at her. This time, I did not hide the truth from myself. My daughter. For the first time in 7 years, I walked into a room knowing the little girl sleeping inside was my daughter. I stood beside her bed and watched the soft morning light move across her face. She looked peaceful, innocent, completely unaware that the world around her had just changed. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to say, I am your father. But I stopped myself. A truth this big could not be dropped into the heart of a 7-year-old like a stone. It had to be carried carefully. Lily opened her eyes and smiled. You are still here. I am. Why? I smiled. Because I promised. She looked at me for a long moment. You look sad again. I sat beside her. Sometimes people cry when they are happy too. She thought about that. That sounds strange. It is. She smiled. You are strange. I laughed softly. It was the first real laugh I had heard from myself in years. The doctor said Lily could leave the hospital later that afternoon. I had already arranged a safe place for her to stay, but I knew there was another problem. Margaret Carter was still missing, and so was Emily. The old recording had given me answers, but it had also created new questions. Who had convinced Emily to disappear? Who had changed Lily's name? And why had Thomas spent 7 years telling me my daughter was gone? I asked my investigator to keep searching, but I did not tell Lily about any of it. Instead, I spent the afternoon sitting beside her while she colored pictures. She drew the same house again. This time, there were 4 people inside. A little girl, a woman, a man, and another figure standing outside the door. Who was that? I asked. Lily frowned. I do not know. You drew him. Maybe he is someone who is coming. I looked at the picture. Something about those words stayed with me. Someone who is coming. Later, when Lily was ready to leave, I offered her my hand. She looked at it, then placed her small fingers inside mine. We walked through the hospital doors together. Outside, New York was bright and busy. Cars moved along the street. People hurried past us. Nobody knew that the man walking beside a little girl had just found the child he had mourned for 7 years. Lily looked up at me. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. With you? I hesitated for only a second. If you want. She looked down at our hands. Then she nodded. I want. Those 2 words meant more to me than any victory I had ever known. At my home, Lily stood quietly in the entrance hall. The house was large, but suddenly it felt different. Too quiet. Too empty. She looked around at the photographs on the walls. Then she stopped in front of one old picture. It showed me and Emily holding our newborn daughter. Lily stared at it for several seconds. That baby looks like me. My heart tightened. Yes, I said. She does. Lily looked at me. Who is she? I walked toward her, then knelt so we were at the same height. Her name was Lily. The little girl stared at the photograph. Then she looked back at me. My name is Lily. I nodded. I know. Silence filled the room. She looked confused, but not afraid. Why do you know? I reached for the photograph and held it carefully. Because I have been looking for that little girl for a very long time. Lily looked at the picture again. Then she looked at me. Did you love her? My voice broke when I answered. More than anything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she slipped her hand into mine again. Maybe you can love me too. I closed my eyes. I had spent 7 years searching for my daughter. I never imagined the hardest part would be learning how to become her father again. That night, Lily fell asleep on the couch with a coloring book resting against her chest. I stood nearby, watching the soft light from the living room lamp touch her face. For years, I had imagined my daughter as a memory, a photograph, a voice I could barely remember. Now she was breathing quietly in my home. She was real, and somehow, I was terrified of making one wrong move. I covered her with a blanket and walked into my study. My investigator was waiting on the phone. I found Thomas Reed, he said. He has been living outside Manhattan for several years. I stared at the photograph of Emily and me on my desk. Find out everything. There is something else. What? Margaret Carter contacted Thomas 2 days ago. My eyes narrowed. Where is she? I do not know yet. I looked toward the living room. Lily was still asleep. Keep looking. I ended the call and sat alone in the dark. Thomas had known. Margaret had known. Emily had disappeared to protect Lily. And somehow, all of them had been connected to the same secret. I opened the old recording again. Emily's voice filled the room. There is someone you trusted who knows exactly what happened. I stopped the recording. I knew what I had to do. But before I could make another call, I heard small footsteps behind me. Lily stood in the doorway, holding her silver bracelet. I had a bad dream, she whispered. I stood immediately. Come here. She walked toward me and reached for my hand. I dreamed Mommy was leaving. My chest tightened. She told me not to worry, Lily continued. She said someone would find me. I knelt beside her. Do you remember anything else? Lily looked at the bracelet. She told me to keep this. Why? Because Daddy would know it. I could barely breathe. Did she ever tell you what your daddy looked like? Lily looked directly at me. She said he had eyes that looked sad when he smiled. I looked away for a moment. Emily had always known me too well. Even after all those years, she had found a way to describe me to our daughter. Lily touched my cheek. Are you my daddy? The question was so simple, so innocent, yet it carried 7 years of pain inside it. I could have avoided it. I could have told her we needed more time. But I remembered the promise I had made to myself. No more lies. Not with her. Yes, I whispered. I am your daddy. Lily stared at me. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I closed my eyes and held her gently. I had faced powerful men, difficult choices, and years of uncertainty without allowing myself to break. But that small hug brought every wall inside me down. I found you, I whispered. Lily rested her head against my shoulder. I knew you would. The next morning, I received one final message from my investigator. Margaret had been found. She had agreed to meet. And she had one condition. I had to come alone. I looked at Lily sleeping peacefully upstairs. For 7 years, someone had controlled the truth about my daughter. That ended now. I was no longer searching for the child I had lost. I was standing beside the daughter I had found. And this time, I would not let anyone take the truth away from her again.